Hey y'all, welcome to the Team LoCoFit Roundtable, hosted by me, Laurin Conlon, owner of Team LoCoFit. Each week, I am joined by one of our coaches to dive headfirst into the nutrition, training, mindset, and coaching strategies we use with our clients. If you loved the show, please subscribe, leave us a review, tell a friend, you know the drill. And for more information about coaching, the programs we offer, and additional content, visit teamlocofit.com.
All right, y'all, and we are back with Coach Sam this week, and happy Thanksgiving week. This is coming out on Monday, which Thanksgiving will be on a Thursday. As always, in case you guys didn't know, the date didn't change. It's always Thursday. On a little team say. That's actually why we did the podcast, to remind you guys that it's actually Thanksgiving. No, but seriously, I cannot believe what time of year it is. This year has been so strange. And I cannot even think, because as soon as Thanksgiving happens, and I just feel like Christmas is here in like a few weeks. So I don't know, everybody's getting fucking cold this year because I haven't thought of one Christmas gift. Just like everybody's on the naughty list. Like, I don't give a shit. Like, you guys, I am the gift, right? Like all of those memes where it's like, where you don't get anybody.
It's me.
It's me. But really, so it is Thanksgiving week, and we wanted to cover kind of, you know, a few things with eating around the holidays. And, you know, we pretty much do a podcast on this like once a year, but I think that it's a really important podcast because, you know, there are so many questions around not just Thanksgiving, but like as we go into all the holidays, you know, there are so many events now. Pretty much after this week, there'll be the office parties, like the friend parties, you know, the Secret Santa stuff, you know, whatever holidays that you celebrate with your family. Like, there's gonna be so many things from Thanksgiving to New Year's, like that, those 6 weeks. There's a lot of social events. So we're going to be talking about this in the context of Thanksgiving, but you can pretty much use this for any holiday week.
Yeah.
And the first thing I wanted to go over was just like, okay, hey, like what to do this week, right? Like, it's the week of, this is coming out on a Monday, you know, what would you do this week? And really, we would suggest not really changing anything. You know, a lot of people, and of course, this is going to depend very contextual on your goals. If you have specific goals, or you are prepping, or you're cutting weight, like this is not the podcast for you. If you're doing that, you got to stick to your plan. Sorry. But if this is for everybody else who does not have a weight or body comp that they have to be at exactly the week after Thanksgiving, pretty much the week should just be normal. Don't go into this with a, oh, it's Thanksgiving weekend, I need to restrict all week.
Right. Yeah. And try to keep it as consistent as you can, as opposed to having those swings, because it's going to create more anxiety, more like irregularity in your routine, especially when people who track are very like habit-based, routine-based. So to throw yourself off of your routine already doesn't set you up for the best mindset going into a big day or event that's really outside of your routine.
Yeah. And then, you know, obviously we are talking about Thanksgiving as the day, but typically most people, there's going to be a lot of things that entire weekend, right? Like Thanksgiving kind of kicks it off. A lot of people are not going to be working on Friday, or they're going to be going and doing another celebration, or their friends have an event, or, you know what I mean? So it just kind of kicks off a lot of stuff for that weekend. So it's really easy to think, oh, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, let me restrict, because now I'm going to have Thursday to Sunday as kind of like a fuck all fest. And it's like, hey, that's not a good idea either, because now if you do restrict, you're almost giving yourself that permission to just kind of do whatever you want, because you're like, oh, well, I already restricted earlier this week.
Yeah.
But that's really the wrong mindset.
I earned it.
I earned this. Yeah. Worst mindset to have around food possible, because it does create these compensatory behaviors. It does create this binge restrict cycle. So like you said, consistency is going to be the most important thing leading up to this. And in reality, hey, let's say you do have a few meals that are out of your norm. It's just a few meals, right? You don't need to crash diet for 3 days and think that's really going to change anything. Have your normal meals, do your normal training, drink your normal water, take your supplements, like keep everything regular. And then when it is, let's say, the day of Thanksgiving, right? This is typically where we get a lot of questions or a lot of just kind of like navigational things. And one thing to think about, again, is that it is one meal. Now, you're going to ask me some questions at the end, which it could be more than one meal, but let's say presumably it's one meal. Beforehand, you really don't want to go into this starving. I mean, how many times have you done that for an event and then that ends really bad?
Yeah. Or just anytime you create that restriction, it's not sustainable.
But especially for like a big meal or like a party, right? You're like, I'm just going to have like a protein shake. And now if you're eating Like, listen, if it's early, right, and there's gonna be food all day, that's different. But if you're, say your family's coming over at 4:00, one protein shake up until then is going to mentally open the floodgates to be like, appetizers, drinks, everything. Like, snack table is gonna be wrecked.
Yeah. And one helpful thing, I think this probably was a few years ago, like we had talked about this when I was working with you initially, like that it's not even about like restriction. Like we don't want to restrict leading up into an event, but there is something to be said about like creating some semblance of balance for the day, because when you go into that meal, what are the most like prominent food groups that you're going to eat? Probably carbs and fats, and then your protein in your turkey, but like mostly carbs and fats. And so what can we have earlier in the day to balance that out? We could lower our carbs and fats a little and have more protein to create that overall balance, as opposed to being like, I can't have anything and I'm going to eat it all. Like I'm going to have normal meals. I'm just going to play with my ratios a little bit to make the overall experience a little more balanced and less restrictive.
And I think that there's something to be said about restriction versus restraint. And me and Karina did a podcast on this, and just kind of how to balance restraint in your life. And people hear the word restriction and they think, oh my gosh, we very much are openly as a team like, hey, we want to eliminate as much restriction as possible, because that leads to these ups and downs and these binges and these overeating cycles and these subsequent restriction cycles. But that doesn't mean that we're saying you can't have any restraint. Just because we're saying, hey, enjoy the day, does not mean that we want you to overeat on that meal either. Like, it's not an either or. It's more of a, hey, let's, like you said, have a balanced approach. Let's go into it having a solid amount of protein, maybe lowering your carbs and fats. Yeah, you don't need to like eat a ton of carbs and fats before Thanksgiving dinner. The point was also not to say like, hey, have one scoop of whey protein and then be starving, right? So there is a balance here, and you do need to have some semblance of normalcy. Like I said, drink your water, go work out that morning, do normal things. And then when you have that meal, now you don't want to plow down, your grandma to go to the appetizer bar, or like, literally eat the entire dessert to yourself, or, whatever. Like, it's just, go for 18 scoops of stuffing, which I love stuffing, but there is, again, like a time and a place for all of that. And restriction and restraint are very different.
Right. And it's not like how you said that too. Like, we want you to enjoy the meal. You want to be able to enjoy the meal because it's meant to be enjoyed, but that doesn't mean like a lot of times. Start over. This is why I love how we focus so heavily on like lifestyle balance and untracked meals, because those weekly or bi-weekly or like twice a week untracked meals really help you to understand how to eat like mindfully and untracked and enjoy yourself without the mentality of, this is my free meal or this is my holiday meal, I have to eat everything to enjoy it. And instead it's, I'm eating this food, I'm enjoying every bite of it, and I know when I'm full, and I know when I push past my limits, and I know that this isn't the last time I'm going to be able to eat good food. And so you can still have that. And it doesn't even feel like restraint anymore, because you're in control. You're not out of control and having to rein yourself in. It's, all right, I'm good. And so it's the same patterns we use in those untracked meals, and that we work with our clients on a weekly basis. And in our check-ins, we even talk about this, like, how was your mindset around your food and your untracked meals? It's those same habits that we then take into these larger meals or like our holiday meals.
Yeah. And hopefully, again, the goal is that all of this transitions to real life. The reason that we have untracked meals for clients is not just because we think it's a cool thing for them to do. It's because it's a real life thing to do. You're going to have social events. You're going to have family dinners. Holidays are going to happen whether you want them to or not. So you need to be able to have the ability and the capability to really do this. And life is always going to do what it wants to do, right? And our circumstances rarely change. But how we handle the circumstances is incredibly important. And I can think of so many holidays over the years that have changed for me because of how I approach it mentally. I've gone through holidays where it's like, oh, I want to eat everything later, so I'm going to not eat a lot earlier, right? And then that turns really badly. And not to say that I'm not going to eat. I'm going to eat a lot on Thanksgiving. Like, I'm going to. I'm not going to leave and be like, oh, I don't feel anything. Like, no, I'm going to have a larger meal. But I have gotten to a place now where I can leave that meal and go, I'm full, but I don't feel sick. And I'm not going into the pantry, when everybody else is asleep to continue to eat. And for anybody who's ever struggled with these food issues, those are very real things. Getting up from the table and having 4 servings of something that's really, really calorie dense, having 8 drinks, and then, an hour goes by and everybody's passed out and you're still eating. Like, those are things that happen to people, and we want to avoid that. So, frame it, set yourself up for success. Like I said, drink water, go to the gym, have a few meals before, maybe keep them a little bit lighter, but still make sure that you're eating. And then when you do eventually have that meal, what I always like to tell people is pick the things that you like the most that you can't really have all the time, right? Like, sure, if it's like a store-bought loaf of bread that you're kind of like, I don't really care about this, versus like this like sweet potato casserole that you like only make on Thanksgiving. Yeah. Probably have that, right? Like, if you're going to make a choice, maybe have like a small piece of the bread if you really want it. But if it's like, hey, I'd rather have this thing that I'm not going to be able to have normally, still have obviously protein as much as possible. But really like see what's available and then go for that. And if you don't want something, don't have it, which that's our second podcast is food pushing and kind of how to handle all that. But definitely pick the things that you don't normally have. And that are, special to whether your family or who you're with or whatever it might be.
Yeah. And checking in on why you're choosing the foods that you're choosing too, because we can get in the tendency, even with, I think a lot of people struggle with this early on in their untracked meals of being like, well, I really want this, but the salad's a healthier option, I think. So I'm going to get the salad, but I really wanted the burger. Like, the same thing can go in the opposite direction. Like, I really want the salad, but again, this is my untracked meal. So I'm going to get the burger just because I can. And so asking yourself, like, what do I want? And then getting what you truly want, and then not feeling guilty about that because you honored your hunger, you honored the day, you honored the complexity of the food, because it's not, especially on holidays, it's not just food. And to pretend that it is just fooling yourself. So being able to choose the foods you really want and then be at peace with that, like, that's awesome.
Yeah. And then if you can, I know I always try to tell people, if you're not hosting and if you have no idea what's going to be there and you do want to have something that that you like and is a semi-quality option, or it might not be, it might be really, really calorie dense, but you really like it and you want to bring it, feel comfortable doing that. Of course, ask the host. Some people are really particular about that kind of stuff, but if you are going somewhere and you're not cooking, you could always be like, hey, I want to bring this, or, can I bring this appetizer, or can I bring this side dish, or whatever it might be. So that's another way to kind of bring something so what's going into it. If you aren't aware of kind of what is being cooked, most people, I feel like at like Thanksgiving do, if you're going to like a party, that generally it's like, hey, let me bring something a little bit healthier because I have no idea what's going to be there. So I'll at least have this. You're like, I brought carrots.
Yeah.
and
health.
Thank God, because there's just like chips and chicken wings. So, which again are totally fine. But if you want to have something that's like a better option that fits within your goals and you want to eat, then make sure that you bring it.
Well, and like you said at the beginning of the podcast too, if you're in a different season of life too, like if you're 3 weeks out from the stage, like definitely bring something that you can eat. Like, don't feel, and that's going to be in the second episode, don't feel like you have to sacrifice like serious goals for the day, because this isn't good. Like, knock on wood, this isn't going to be your last Thanksgiving or your last meal. So like, you set yourself up for success in that way if you have to, or if it's that time of your life.
Yeah. And most importantly, like you said, this isn't just about food. This is about the people that you're with and the memories that you're making. And yes, food and alcohol are a part of that, but it doesn't have to be. And it's only one part of it for people who, that is even a thing for them.
Yeah.
And then lastly, so afterwards, the next day, right? Like I said, this Thanksgiving might kick off a whole string of events, with your family or your friends or whatever it might be, or just, you're going home, like to your home, say you don't live in your hometown, now you're going to visit, like there's usually a lot of social things that are happening. Use these same principles. If you know that on Saturday night, you're going to be getting together with a big group of your friends, and maybe you're going out to eat, or maybe somebody's hosting like a little get together, do the same thing earlier. Get some activity in. Go to the gym, drink your water, take your supplements, have some normal meals. Don't go into this and say, you know what, Thanksgiving was on Thursday, so I'm just going to eat like a dumpster fire for the next 4 days. Let's not do that, right? if in your heart's desire, that's really what you want to do, sure. But I would probably just say, don't do that. You're going to feel worse. And really not even just feeling gross. We don't want to go into that cycle of like under eating, overeating, and it's so easy to get into. And you could be on a streak of so many good weeks. And then as soon as you add that in, that is our easy default button. And anytime that you're in a stressful situation, you're always going to default to your easiest patterns, your easiest behaviors. And for most people, an under eating, overeating situation is easier because extremes are easier for most people. So really fight that urge. Even if you have your social calendar is filled to the brim Thanksgiving weekend, you can still, like you said, if you want to order a salad, you can. Don't feel bad about that. If you want to order a more calorie dense meal, go ahead, but make sure the other ones are, a little bit tighter, a little bit more on track. So there is no right or wrong or perfect situation here, but really the message that we want to convene to everybody is don't radically change things because of Thanksgiving Day or that weekend. Make good choices, stick with what you normally do for the most part, and then enjoy a few things. And that's going to look very different for everybody. Based on kind of their goals and what they're eating and what's around. But I know you had a few questions, because like just kind of common client questions and scenarios that we go through. So I want to hit those. Definitely.
I want to hear your feedback on this. And I think that everybody wants to know what Laurin Conlon has to say on these things, because they come up over and over and they're just, I don't know, there's interesting questions. So what if a client, or what if you want to track Thanksgiving? We tell you, go untracked, how much you want? And they're like, what if I want to track it? What would you say?
So of course, this would depend on the client. This would depend on the situation, right? If this was somebody who, this is a hard one, because I'm generally somebody who wants a client to have that flexibility and wants my client to have the ability to not feel like they have to do that. But there are outstanding circumstances, right? There are people who have maybe just gotten out of a really rigid diet. There are people who are really repairing themselves from a rough relationship with food. And I can't expect somebody to just be like, okay, yeah, no problem, right? Like that is not, it's like exposure therapy is a real thing, right? Like you don't want to just take somebody who's in really, really far one direction and then just tell them, hey, have Thanksgiving untracked. Totally.
Yeah.
But what I would say instead is maybe like, hey, like, I don't really want you to like plug it into MyFitnessPal. But I want you to go into the meal with roughly maybe these targets and kind of eyeball it, so it's something that is a little bit more flexible, but it's not just like, hey, go to the deep end and hope that you know how to swim.
Yeah.
We want to avoid that. But ultimately, I hope that a client has gotten to a position to where we don't have to do that, but there's always outstanding circumstances. And I'm never going to have somebody kind of like in a bathtub and then like swimming in like, a lake without any, raft and any way to swim, right? Like you just can't.
Yeah.
You can't do that, and you can't expect that from people, because guess what's going to happen. If somebody was not in a position to have an untracked meal, and then I said, go have Thanksgiving untracked, I don't care, I'm not going to give you any guidelines, like you need to figure that out. Guess what's going to happen? They're probably going to track, or they're going to restrict anyway, or they're going to be so mentally flustered they can't handle the day, and then they might actually end up overeating anyway, which I know sounds crazy, but that's like the trajectory of what happens there. So I might not say, hey, let's track it in MyFitnessPal, or like, here's exactly what you need to do for the day. But it's like, maybe earlier in the day, let's hit these targets. And then for dinner, roughly have this and don't weigh it, but let's just eyeball it.
Yeah.
There's always a happy medium with these types of things. And it really just does depend on the client. If this is somebody who's been working on untracked meals for a while, no, it's like, hey, what's the issue? Like, why are you, doing this? Like, we've already had all these meals, for weeks or months leading up to it. Like, you're in a position to do this. But some people need a little bit more guidance, depending on where they are in the journey, and that's okay.
Yeah. And like you said, that's probably something you would know as a coach already. Like, I don't want to set them up for failure by telling them to go untracked. But if the question came back, that would be the question I would ask is, why would you like to track? What are you not comfortable with? What can we work on to help you be successful in going into this event? Because I think the biggest point you said too is like mentally flustered. Like, it can be such a mental battle if you're not set up for success there. So I think that's a great answer.
And then that's going to ruin the holiday anyway, right? Like, that's going to ruin the holiday more than tracking it would. So it's all about balancing that out with the client on an individual basis.
Yeah. What if they want to drink?
Oh, well, you're on the right team is the answer there. Clearly, you guys know that I'm very pro everybody being able to drink if they want to. Obviously you don't have to. That should be something that is pushed on people. I don't believe either. But I don't think that people should feel bad about wanting to have alcohol, particularly in this kind of a setting. So what I would say in that sense, and you know, this kind of goes for all untracked meals, right? It's all about restraint in some areas. Mm-hmm. If you're going to drink more, you need to eat a little bit less to kind of offset it. It's just the way that it goes. Mm-hmm. And not necessarily just from a calorie perspective, but, you know, just from like hey, how much overall am I consuming? And, you know, because, you know, drinks really do add up, particularly, you know, especially in the holidays, there's going to be like fun drinks, which can be just like chock full of stuff. If you're having a few glasses of wine or champagne, like, okay, like that's a little bit different. If you're throwing back mixed eggnog drinks, like, yeah, you need to like tighten that up a little bit. Now, they do have some pretty like good light eggnog and all that. In any case, you can make stuff modified. Trust me.
She's like, we'll figure it out.
I'm like, we got to figure it out. But, you know, or maybe if there's a drink that you really, really like, maybe have one of those and then have, you know, 2 glasses of champagne, right? Mm-hmm. It's all about, again, restraint. And if I know that for me, I'm going to be drinking because that's what I do.
Yep.
I'm going to be a little bit tighter with some of my other food choices. That's just how I like to operate. That is what I enjoy. That's what I like. I still eat all the food, but I might just for appetizers, just have like shrimp, right? Mm-hmm. And not have, you know, everything else that's there. And then I might be a little bit tighter with my servings at dinner. And I really like dessert, but I might have like a piece or like a half of 2 things, you know, instead of whatever, because I might have had a few drinks. And, you know, again, ultimately you have to see how comfortable. I'm somebody who has a huge appetite. Mm-hmm. So I'm not going to be like, oh, if I had a few drinks and some food, I'm going to be stuffed to the gills. Like, no, I'm fine. Like, I'm honestly fine. And usually, you know, you're starting kind of the holidays earlier, like, you know, and then just hanging out, and then eventually dinner will come around. So it's not like it's all just like a one setting either. But yeah, just you have to be mindful of what you're consuming. And like I said, there's a big difference of having a glass of champagne versus having eggnog and rum. Like, you know what I mean? Like, and you'll notice the difference too. Like, but one thing I do have to work on with some clients, and this is just, again, something that hopefully we've worked on before we've gotten to a holiday period, is eating with alcohol. Some people really, really struggle to stop themselves.
Yeah.
And you know, they have 2 drinks and then it's like the floodgates have opened.
Right. Chains are off.
Their hunger is just through the roof. And part of it too, I think, is mental. You know, like you go, oh, I'm drinking and I want to eat. And I've always done a pretty good job at that. I'm not somebody who like will have a bunch of drinks and then like wants to go like to fast food or like anything. Like, I'm just not somebody like that. I'm somebody who just kind of like, yeah, sure, this might like enhance something, but I don't equate those 2 things. And I think mentally it's really important. Same thing with weed. A lot of people, you know, enjoy, you know, THC in various forms, but if every time that you do that, you're opening that up to like, I'm going to eat the pantry, that could be a problem. So, you know, you have to be able to moderate yourself here. And that's just something that's going to take work and going to take a little bit of time. But that is an important thing to address. And I've had clients in scenarios before where like, man, like I really like having a glass or 2 of wine, but every time I do that, then I just get the chips or I get the pretzels or I get this. It's like, all right, well, we need to kind of break that habit and do something else.
Yeah. And if you can't break the habit, then you really need to be honest with yourself and weigh those pros and cons. Like, okay, if I know that this is going to cause a big problem for me, especially in a situation where there's a shit ton of food, like probably should keep my drinking like to a minimum. But yeah, I mean, I'm pregnant, so I won't be drinking, but if I could, I'd be in the same position. Like you know, just like enjoying a few drinks, like trying not to snack as much after.
It's very common for me to just like drink a good amount. So like, it doesn't affect me as much. You know, I think that some people, now clearly I'm not drinking like every night, which I think is a big distinguisher here.
Yeah.
But you know, I can go out to dinner and have a bottle of wine and be like,
fine.
Like I feel good, like obviously, but I'm
same. I am not same. Such a fucking lightweight.
Yeah, I'm just not. But we actually did that. We went up to Universe for Jenna was competing.
Yeah.
And we went to of all places, we went to like a hibachi restaurant. Anyways. Which actually I was like, whatever, this is actually pretty good. But before we went, I had probably like half a bottle of wine. I was like just getting ready and stuff. And we get there and then we order another bottle of wine. So I have that split amongst like 3 people. and then started doing like sake. Like, the guy, it was the total side rant. I've never been to such a fun like hibachi place, and obviously they always try to like make it a show or whatever, but the guy was actually like drunk. Like he was literally ordering drinks as he was making our food, and he was just like super ridiculous. It was so funny. Like,
oh my gosh.
Outside of Charleston, we're going to a hibachi restaurant, and the guy's like just he was having the best time. It was so.
He was made for you. He was there
so
for
great.
you.
They were like, and he looks at me, he's like, "It's your birthday," and I'm like, he's like, mm-hmm. He's like, "Get over here!" Like some guy comes out with like a thing to like, you know, make a noise, and they're like screaming. They're like, "Stand on the chair!" I'm like, "Oh my god, what is happening?"
It's my birthday.
It was hysterical. But anyways, I don't know why I got on that rant. So next question.
Next question. So what if we kind of talked about this a little bit, but I'm curious if you have like any more specific suggestions. What if someone has multiple Thanksgivings and not just like I have an office party Tuesday and then dinner on Friday? It's like my parents are divorced. I have 2 Thanksgivings and then the next day I'm going to my in-laws and it's like multiple large meals in a row. How would you handle that?
Very common, actually. Sometimes if people have multiple on one day, sometimes like you said, it's kind of split up over the weekend. So in that situation, I would say, you know, if it's multiple over the weekend, not in one day, just basically like rinse and repeat. Try to do some activity in the morning, whether it is training or just kind of go for a walk, or if you have cardio structured, whatever, like do something active in the morning. You know, drink your water, take your supplements, have some high protein, moderate other meals, and then just enjoy that meal. If the meal is really early, I know some people eat Thanksgiving very, very early. Just kind of see how you're feeling later. You know, you probably won't really want like another full meal, but maybe just have like a protein shake or like a yogurt, something like that. Again, if it's so early and then you're like, all right, should I have a protein shake or like 3 pieces of pie? That's where it's like, maybe we got to have some restraint here, have the protein shake and maybe like a slice or like a small slice or whatever, right? So that would be basically if you have it over multiple days. Just kind of rinse and repeat that cycle. And understand that it's probably going to be a little bit more calorie dense than your normal stuff. It's going to be, you know, your weight's probably going to go up. You're probably going to have some water retention. It's okay. You know, you can't expect to not have those things if you had 3 Thanksgivings, right? Like, you know, managing expectations here is really important. Now, if it is multiple on one day, that gets a little trickier, right? Just because, again, you're surrounded by food and you're probably not even as hungry, but you just like start eating all this stuff, you know? So in that case, what I would do is just mainly structure everything around the protein. Like, okay, hey, we have the protein here. That's my main option. And then just pick, like I said, some of your favorite other sides and just maybe just be a little bit more modest with your portions and maybe decide, all right, you know, I'm going to have some dessert here, but not at the next one. Or I'm going to have a drink or 2 here, but not at the next one, and kind of go that way. Just figure out what is your favorite. And again, remember, like you said, going back to what you said at the beginning, the goal is not just about how much food can you eat in one day. That's not what it's about. You know, it's about being around family. It's about being social, and just kind of enjoying each other's company. And, you know, we all really need that this year. So make that the focus of it. And of course, you know, enjoy food. I'm a huge foodie. Like I want everybody to enjoy their food, but make sure that you're still being, you know, balanced about it. And especially if you have multiple in one day, you don't want to start off and like just feel super sick and awful for the rest of the day. So have a modest plate and then just kind of do that at everywhere you go.
Yeah. And like you said earlier, with Thanksgiving, at least you typically know like what's going to be there, especially, and like you're going to know like, dude, my grandma's ex is like so good. I'm going to eat her stuffing and then I'm going to have the potatoes over here because they're better. Like choose what you want from each place, but like it's the same kind of balance situation. It's just have to be a little more strategic if you hit it twice.
Slightly more strategic, but it's totally possible. And I have people who, like I said, have, you know, do that and for a variety of reasons, and it works out. You just need to make sure that, you know, again, you're mindful going into it, and just enjoy.
Yeah. That is all my
I feel like those are like the main kind of questions. So as this comes out on Monday, if you guys have any other questions, of course, let us know. You can send us a message. And but if not, you can go to teamlocofit.com for anything else, any other information. You can send us an email through there, apply for coaching, etc. And what is the thing I always say? There's like an intro in the beginning, and I totally forget because it's like I recorded it forever ago, and it's just on there. And when I was at Universe, I had a handful of people talking about the podcast, and they were like saying the thing that I always say. I was like, shit, do I always do that? They're like, yeah, it's literally the intro. I was like, oh God, all right. Oh, I can't remember. See, I recorded so long ago, but whatever I said, we'll use that as the outro as well. And if you guys have any
I know what
questions,
you're talking about too. Shoot, we'll get it ready for the next one.
we'll get it right for the next one. Maybe. Highly unlikely, let's be honest. But thank you guys for tuning in, and we will catch you next time.